This is the Changing Times, Changing Worlds Wednesday show. And tonight, see, I had a little crash in my computer and I lost the name of the guest who was going to be on. So I have made apologies and we are trying to set up another week. But meanwhile, tonight we're going to have, I hope, a wonderful discussion about the ethics of using magic. Oh, I like your background. You had a white wall behind you a second ago, and now you're in a forest.
I love these alternate images, and I just realized it looks like the tree is growing out of my head.
It does look like you've got an aureole, around you, like it's a halo.
Yeah.
John, could you make me a cup of tea? Anyway, so every week we have either a discussion or a guest, and I have to get my act together and get some more guests because I love guests. It's easier to talk for an hour if you have somebody to interact with. So I just figured that tonight is, last night Orion Foxwood did a healing ritual online with everybody could put the energy into going to the ancestral. We cannot heal ourselves if we don't heal the ancestral wounds. And considering what I was saying just before, I'm not sure whether it was before or after I hit record. The people who were very much against Obama, the people who are disturbed by people of color having power, it is probably because they were raised before they were old enough to know anything about it, to believe that there's something wrong with people of color. And it disturbed them that Barack Obama was Black. Oh, horror. Excuse me. But while that is not something that was initially their fault, it is their responsibility to control their actions and to learn as much as they can. So there's that. But it still is something that needs a lot of healing and doing healing. I love that Orion did the workshop, the ritual to start ancestral healing, because you have to heal your ancestors. You have to heal your relationship with those who have gone before you can move forward yourself. And so I started thinking about, well, I actually, my connection to that was the Mormons, who have a tendency to get their, apparently they believe, John, can you get that? The yes, I'm on the, I'm recording. Mormons are like to feel that nobody is going to actually get to heaven if they aren't in the Mormon church. So they baptize their ancestors so that our ancestors who may have lived and died before the Mormon church existed can get to heaven. Well, yeah, it's nice to love your ancestors and want what's good for them, but I dare say there's a bunch of people back there who, if they found out about it, would be like, excuse me. Most of my grandparents would be quite offended if you tried to organize things that they weren't, would probably prefer to handle themselves. And so that was part of what I was, what motivated me to say, when you're doing magic, what do you have the right to do? And that's that's kind of what I was, where I started on this. We get into things like this when we're talking about love spells, when we're talking about weather working, when we're talking about a whole lot of things. Now, some branches of Christianity say that the use of any magic is inappropriate for Christians. You're not supposed to do it. As a matter of fact, our local hospital said we're not going to offer Reiki anymore because Reiki is an Oriental religious practice, and which it's not, by the way. And anything that takes away from the glory of God is not acceptable for a Christian, and therefore we're not going to do Reiki. It's like, so no, we'd rather have our patients be in pain than to let them take advantage of this natural human ability to move energy or ki around and make people heal and not hurt. But God forbid that should take away from the glory of God. That was a very stupid phrase. But there is, oh. I'm trying to help my sister get onto the, come on, open up. There you go. There, that should be the link to the show. Let's see if that works. Does it work? Anyway, we'll find out if she gets on. One of the things that is in most of the people that I know who use magic say you shouldn't do something for somebody without, or to somebody, or for somebody without their permission. And so this is a very, this is something that, now the Wiccan Read, which is everywhere, so everybody's, I think everybody's heard of it, which is any harm none, do what ye will. And I've heard a lot of discussions about what will means. It's like, is it your true will? Is it, it's not just do whatever you want, but you may make this choice if it harms no one. And that's a very good place to start. It is kind of like a reminder I'm sorry. I'll turn that off so I don't get distracted. Anyway, yeah, not doing something to somebody against their will. Like if you're looking at a love spell, it's one thing to say, please let love come to me. Please let me be more lovable. Please let me be open to love. That's cool. But if you say, make so-and-so love me, that is very much not cool. You do not want to force someone to do something they don't want to do. In this, in a similar way, weather working is difficult because you don't know if something is, if you make it rain here or stop raining here, if it's going to upset the patterns that are important to having crops grow or trout have enough water to live in. Messing around with a large system, luckily, is really hard. Luckily, it's very difficult to have enough ability to mess with a very large system. It's not impossible. There's a wonderful, horrible story about several covens in Maine. There was a very large drought going on in Maine. I think it was in the 90s. I'd have to go look it up. And so many covens said, look, we've got to break this drought. We've got to, and they did the workings. Of course, they didn't know about each other because covens generally don't. You know the people in your neighborhood. But apparently a great deal of work was being done. And that spring, the drought broke and there was 6 feet of water in Portland running up these streets. So see, you don't know enough to do it. And that was a wonderful point that was made in a Christian way in the movie Bruce Almighty, where apparently God handed Jim Carrey the power to do all kinds of stuff, and he didn't give him the omnipotence to know what was the right thing to do. So he made a lot of chaos and felt really embarrassed about it afterwards. And it's like, hey, God, that's on you. You give somebody power and you don't give them omnipotence enough, sufficient knowledge to go with the power. That's not on the poor joker you were teaching a lesson. So that was a thing. I'm very fond of learning lessons from literature and all kinds of media. Oh, please, somebody say something. Marie, please.
Hey, so going back to the love spell thing, this is one of my cautionary tales. So at the time, I had told myself that I was doing a love spell to bring love to me. My subconscious and what the truth was is I really wanted this specific person. And this is the term where the term magician know thyself is so important, because if you're not honest about what's really going on, which I wasn't about that in that moment to myself, then you're gonna get slapped back. And my slap back was I pined for that man for over 7 years. And that's what I walked away with. Magician, know thyself. You have to know why you're doing something, and do not be fooled by your ego about why you're doing something.
Yeah, it is. I mean, admittedly, the covens who were trying to break a drought had the good intentions in mind. And I'm sure you had the best of intentions. One of the saddest things that love spells that I remember was a friend. I knew better. I knew better. And but a friend came to me and he said, she's in love with me and I'm not in love with her. And we're really good friends. So we would go very well together. 8 years later, he discovered he was gay. So, but I figured since he was asking me to put this love spell on him and he wanted to be in love with this girl so that, she'd be happy and he'd be happy. Okay, fine. I did it. He was in love with her. 2 weeks later, he was back and it's like, no, this is wrong. And can you take it off? Well, yeah, it's a heck of a lot harder to take off a love spell than it is to put it on. But at least it was entirely acceptable to all persons involved. So, and we just didn't know back in the late 60s, early 70s that people could be gay and you know, don't mess with it. So, but we don't know enough. So it is a really, really good thing that frequently our abilities are always lagging behind our imaginations and our wants and our wishes to do what, you know, the things we do. The truth of the matter is that we the truth of the matter is it's hard work. Magic isn't easy. You have to put energy into it the same as you do into any other bit of work. Marsha Pekans teaches magical self-defense and self-defense, your basic,
No,
thank you.
no honey or
Oh, could you put
premiums.
someone in? She teaches the self-defense. Now there's a truism in witchcraft, which is a witch that cannot hex cannot heal. And it is very, very difficult to be able to put up a any kind of defense against something that's incoming if you don't know the nature of how a hex works and how to block it. I mean, it's like it'd be very difficult to block a blow if you don't know how to throw one. So, but her experience in teaching martial arts is that those people who are learning it for the wrong reason are too freaking lazy to get the discipline to learn how to be dangerous martial artists. The biggest danger for them is that they're going to hurt themselves by doing something stupid. And heck, that's kind of karma. And but that is 3/4 of the stories in paranormal fiction. If you look back at the charming original Sabrina story, the TV show, it basically is a teenager who says, oh, I've got magic, I can use it to do stuff. And every time she has a problem, she uses magic and it screws it up even worse. And she has to actually do what anybody else would do to work out her problems. And that is a safety valve. That is something that, yes, magic works, but you have to learn to focus it. And so that is a thing that is a safety valve for us. Yeah, speak.
So kind of on the other end of that,
kind of what I feel too.
People can actually unintentionally curse someone. So when you're gossiping about someone or talking negative about someone, you are doing a curse. And so when I talk to any young magic practitioner, like ethics are so important. There is a really good lesson right there. Knowing your words, owning your thoughts and your words, like once again, magician, know thyself. That became a mantra for me, because if I didn't know what I was saying and why I was saying it, that can be a curse on someone.
That reminds me of, I did a workshop on evil eye. And in many of the traditions that have evil eyes, they have they have the tradition that says, if you are thinking badly at somebody, if you are jealous, if you are cross, then you can put an evil eye on them. And having, read all the books I could find on it, 4 or 5 books out there on the evil eye, I came up with the answer to how to avert the evil eye. If you are afraid you may inadvertently put the evil eye on someone, there is a way to deal with this, and that is bless them. bless them, bless yourself, bless everybody around you. The more positive energy you put out, the more you're going to neutralize the negative energy you inadvertently put out. And yes, it's very hard not to get cranky when you get hurt. And you know, you can, it's hard to tell whether you have tripped over something and hurt yourself, or your immediate reactions to get cross. I am constantly yelling at inanimate objects around the house because, like, what are you doing? Don't you fall down. Yes, I know I stacked the books too high, but you're the ones that fell down. My bad. I get cranky. I'm old. But that's me. That's on me. But the way to get around inadvertently messing with somebody. But what do you do about somebody who is using the natural abilities of humans to project their energy out to change the world? That's what magic is that we have energy, we can send it places, and it has effects. How do you not do something that will hurt somebody? We have this problem with the rest of our lives as well. How do you put your money in your 401k so that you don't be a burden to your children when you get old? And if you have told your investment guy, because most of us like, I don't do anything about investing money. So you tell them, you know, I want money so that I will not be a burden to my kids when I'm old. But how do you know that that isn't going to be putting money into Nestle, where they are stealing water from aquifers and selling it and leaving nothing for the people who need that, and the animals and the land that needs that water? How do you know it's not going into a pipeline that is destroying sacred lands and stealing? That's on you. There's a lot of things we don't know, and the only answer is you create effects around you, and it is your responsibility to figure out what those effects are that you are creating. No, you don't have control over all of them, but you can do your best. You can try. Now, if you realize that you're being cranky at somebody, and certainly when they jerk almost runs you off the road because he's not paying on, your first reaction would be, sorry to hear about your penis, or whatever thing you do, flip off the other guy. But as soon as you've gotten over your shock and your fear, crank it back and say, he may have just gotten a phone call and he may be rushing someplace to he may be a volunteer fireman going off to save a life. We don't know. And you can take it back and you can say, bless you. I hope that if you're just an asshole, you stop being an asshole. If you are being a good person, that you have not been hurt by my negative energy out there. You have the ability to call back and the inadvertent stuff that you send out, but you have to be aware of what you're doing. And as I say, just bless everything. Bless. If there's somebody you like, bless them. If there's somebody who you don't like, oh gosh, they need it more than anybody else does. And what you put out comes back. So if you are a magic user and you put out a whole lot of angry energy, of I really want something horrible to happen to them energy, you're inviting, I want something horrible to happen back in your life. I have a total faith in karma. I don't believe it's as immediate. I mean, sometimes they're like, oh, please, I know karma is going to get them. Can I watch? That's me being petty. I know it, but You know, that the urge to want to observe that the world is fair is not horrible. The world frequently isn't fair, or at least it's unbalanced in many ways. And you don't get a flood in one place without having a drought in another place. And that's sad, but we can try and be instruments of balance. We can try to make things better. I'm going to point out, if you're using Magick, the chances are very good that you're not going to be able to have a huge effect. You pour a cup of, a bucket of hot water into your bathtub, and it's going to warm your bathtub up. You pour that same bucket of hot water into the ocean, and it's not going to do a darn thing. Work locally. Help your neighbors. Help your family. Help the land that you live on. That's your best and most effective way of using your energy. And I would really, really, really like somebody else to contribute opinions, attitudes. Jenny, were you waving, saying you want to? Good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I find that the key word for me in trying to be sure everything is right is intent. Focus on the intent of the magic you want to work. Now, obviously, spouting off the guy who cut you off in traffic is not something that had intent at all. It happened. Mm-hmm. If you are trying to have an effect, make sure what your intent is. Make sure it's a good intent. Make sure it's the right intent, that it's focused on the right person or places or things. And be clear about that. Have that focus narrow enough that it really speaks to that intent. I used to work in a New Age shop, and people would ask me, well, what works better, the essential oils or the candle magic? And I'd say, and whatever works for you is what works. The key is intent, no matter which method you're using.
I just want to jump in with the philosophical argument about good. So if someone physically harms me, I put a hex upon them, it is good in the sense that it is just. So I just wanted to bring that up, that good isn't always going to bring balance. It's
right.
Yes.
Yeah. I often use the words that first come to my mind and I don't necessarily have thought them through quickly enough, which is exactly like the magic. So I don't come from a place of group practice. I don't come from a place of knowing very many people personally and having interacted with them a long time. I've just developed all this myself over time. I don't practice magic very often, but when I do, it is with intent. And I try
that may be why witches are frequently shown to be old, but by the time you've gotten good at it, you've also gotten some wisdom, and that's why. And that's why some of the best stories are of young witches who are doing very dramatic things that are very stupid and are going to come back on them. But yeah, when you're old like us, you have a little bit more wisdom. You have a little bit more perspective. You have a lot more experiences, dumb mistakes under your belt. You've seen some. Yes, go.
Oh, I just want to say, well, I think that's a challenge as modern witches, because we do not have like the apprentice kind of thing. And in the Witches of Down East I'm involved with, we have older women and younger women. And that is so crucial. And there's so many younger practitioners who only hang out with other younger practitioners. And I've heard some horror stories from those things. So mixed circles and having a variety of ages is so important in practicing.
Once again, diversity is good for us. But yeah, but I'm, if I were going to break it down and give people a rule of thumb to work with, it's that Magick is like anything else. It is simply a tool. Magick is learning how to use energy to interact with the other energy of the world to make things happen. We do a whole lot of other stuff. We drive cars. A car could be a deadly weapon, or it can be really useful for moving stuff from one place to another that you don't want to carry on your back. We use phones, we use computers, we use a lot of things that are very powerful. And yes, almost all of these tools make things easier for us, but they make it easier for us to have bigger effects with less effort on our own part. Thank goodness Magick, we don't have enough techniques to do it too well. I've got some techniques. I know Runewalder, which is a technique I use, has had some really amazing techniques, and I feel confident using it for healing, which is what I'm good at using it for, because I think healing is good for people. I know it can be used for a lot of other things, and I have done a lot of other things, but I'm just a lot more comfortable using it for healing. This is why I yesterday suggested to people, hey, time that is not a time, space that is not a space, there is no reason not to do a working in your now and sending it to where the working needs to be. You don't have to be doing it at exact the same time. If you've got Orion's ritual and you do it today instead of yesterday when everybody else who was watching was doing it, you can send it from that place that is not a place and time it is not a time to heal where it needs to be. I have sent Magick into the past and had the effect happen. I've observed this. In some ways, that makes me seem like a really powerful Magick user. Like, no, I just learned how to do that. It's something like, you should see how inept I am with a computer. And that's where Lois laughs, because she's seen it.
It's not only the entire joy of cooking, but just using one recipe all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just happen to have learned that, and it's useful for me. Just because it is useful to hear it, I'm going to tell you, when I'm hurting, when I'm not doing well, I cannot collect and direct the energy. So I'm not so good at healing when I'm hurting. And so I realized that I couldn't help myself at that moment, but I said, okay, I can do it later. And I used the image of the movie Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, where they were going through time and they'd say, remember a wastebasket, and through the wastebasket, remember the keys. And so I said, remember to heal yourself later. When I, an hour later, I healed myself and sent it. I looked around, I saw what was going on around me so that I could target that moment in time. And 2 seconds later, the pain and the fatigue that I was suffering from was gone, and I was able to continue doing what I needed to do. Could it be psychosomatic? Yes, it could. Could it, the human brain does a lot of things, but is the technique I used Magick technique? Yes, it was. I am totally convinced that you can change the past, and that is a useful thing when you're doing ancestral healing. But it's awfully hard, because when you incarnate into a body, you are essentially signing a unwritten contract that you're going to go along with physics as it exists in this world. And in this world, there is time. But when you get into your inner self, which isn't the body, then you can use the energy, the magical energy, to create effects.
That sounds like a topic for another Wednesday show.
Oh, but unfortunately, it would be if I knew more about it than that, but that's about all I know. I know it works. I know how I do it, but I've just pretty much told you almost all of what I know. So, but what I guess the point I was trying to make is that magic is like any other tool, and you have, and the ability to, is magic good or bad? No, it's not. It seems bad or seemed bad to some parts of the Christian church, because in the early years of the Christian church, but when Christianity was still quite small and there were a lot of other religions around, they were in competition. So the biggest thing almost anybody wants is healing. That is, and the Christians were excellently good at that. And so they tried to convince people that if you're being healed by the other gods, if you're being healed by the innate powers of human beings,
She freezes up at least once a show, I've noticed.
news, but apparently the good news that Christ loves you wasn't enough, and so they had to say, no, you can't hang with anybody else. Nobody tells me who I get to hang with.
I think we lost you a bit in the middle of that there. The image froze and
that's okay.
Anymore.
I'm sorry. Yes, I got that little totally useless flash across the screen that said my connection was unstable.
Yeah.
Duh. Yeah. Anyway.
It matches the rest of us.
But it is a tool, is used with intent to do something. It is not the tool you are using that is evil. It is what you are doing with it that is bad or good. You can use a knife to cut somebody in order to put them in pain, or you can use it to cut them to, little cut, take out a splinter, big cut, take out an appendix. There's nothing bad about the knife, the tool, or the cutting, unless of course you're bad at it and you do something. Again, once going back to what we were saying earlier, if you do it wrong because you don't know what you're doing, you can cause effects you didn't intend.
Mm-hmm.
So anytime you're using a powerful tool, it is your responsibility to learn how to do it in such a way that you aren't hurting anybody in a way by not doing it, by not being in control. It would be a pity to intend to bless somebody and to hurt them by mistake, which is, I think, what's going wrong with most love spells. In theory, being in love is just wonderful. Having somebody loving you when you're not interested is really uncomfortable. And that is another true, and it has given us a great deal of fiction and a great deal of music.
There's a certain arrogance to thinking you know what the other person wants or needs too.
Yes, arrogance is definitely something that we have to guard against. And there's nothing quite so ego boosting as discovering that you're powerful. This is where you get a lot of teen witches getting in trouble, when when they discover magic works, like, oh, crap, that worked. And they say, wow, I'm really powerful. And then like, let me see what I can do. Like, I can fix this, I can fix that. Let me send spells out and change who gets to be, president and stuff. God, no, don't, you have a vote. A vote's a good thing. You can go out and canvass. You can talk to people about how wonderful you think your candidate is and why he's good. But
just going back to the arrogance thing,
yes.
in Thelema, they are referred to as the Black Brothers, those who realize they're powerful and use it for their own shallow ego. That's how we get cult of personality. That's how we get predators. It's how we get people thinking they can control a daemon, the arrogance. And yeah, those people can be very dangerous.
Yeah. And that is something to watch for yourself. You don't want to. But
I don't know my loud. Oh, I didn't know if I was loud enough. I just wanted to thank you firstly for pointing out magic is entirely neutral. It doesn't care one way or the other. Like you said, it's the knife. Knife doesn't make a judgment on what you're doing with it. But also going off of what you said at the very beginning, it almost sounded like one could put themselves in like an ethical circle to the point, well, if I can't not potentially harm someone or something, I should never do magic. And I don't know if you've ever encountered people who are basically scared to even try or terrified of any possibility of like, but if I do this, what if a demon comes after me? And one of my teachers was like, well, if you're scared of magic, don't do it. Yes, self-sabotaging, yes.
As someone remarked at a conclave, we don't say someone poisoned his wife by using black chemistry.
There speaks a historian. You can learn a lot. The best way to learn is from other people's mistakes. If you can learn from other people's mistakes, then you don't have to learn from your own. But yes, magic is neutral. And I often say that it is like tofu. You can make tofu taste like chocolate, or you can make tofu taste like garlic. But it's not, but tofu itself is really rather neutral. What is it that makes your energy taste bad? And usually that's emotions. If you are putting fear in it, if you are putting anger in it, if you are putting the wrong kind of lust into it, it can make it not good energy. And I don't think any of us has not, once you have started feeling energy, you can go into a room and you can feel, it's like, oh, there's something wrong in here. I don't like this. No, you don't have that until you have learned how to detect it. But when you can, what you're detecting is usually the emotion that the energy is being a carrier for. And the carrier is what is going to give it the bad taste or the bad effect, because anger or fear or many of those emotions have targets, and they will aim that energy with an intent at that target. And so that's where your magic starts doing things you didn't want, or you didn't intellectually intend that it should do, because you have put the power into it, you have put the intent into it. Not necessarily the best idea. Oh, did you have something that you wanted to?
It's attachment. It's like you were saying, feeling the energy but living it. But once you start living it, you're entwining your energetic being with the energetic of the intent, whether it's someone else's or your magic. And that attachment is what causes karma, good, bad, or whatever. It's a pattern. And weaving the weird or whatever words you want to use, but you can weave yourself into it. It's very difficult to do any type of magic without weaving yourself into some part of it. And it's that point of where the ethical context goes. Do I want to be attached to this? Because there's always responsibility and repercussions, good, bad, or indifferent. And then there's things that you can say you can do, and if you know how to detach yourself, that's another thing. But at that same time, if what you are working with has an intelligence and looks back at you with attachment, you don't get out of that get out of jail free card, because they're paying attention to you. So it's a two-way street. People say, the rule of three, it's like, I don't go by that. I go, how many bits of environment, God, goddess, environment, your targets, people, places, and things, it's enumerable at something. So as you become wiser and you realize that your actions are affecting more than just your target, more than yourself, you have to look at things collaterally and all, because when you realize all things are connected, just they choose the type of connections. You got to look at the tapestry and see where you fit in it. And believe me, I've woven myself in a tapestry, and I've had to rip myself out of it and undo a lot of things, but that's not a story for now.
Maybe another time. Yeah. But yeah, I'm digging this because we all have so much to share. This is why I like panels best at the at Changing Times, Changing Worlds, because isn't it wonderful to have somebody else who understands and who may know a little bit more than you do, and you can tell you. Attachment is perfect. That's I had forgotten about it, and yeah, I don't care much for the idea of the rule of three. I know why they came up with it, to restrain the little witchlets when they were just starting. But that's something like saying, now that I am in this religion, gravity is going to be 3 times as effective on me. Like, doesn't work that way. Things come back to you. You put out, it comes back to you. And so, now, perhaps as a religious deal, you can make a deal with your spiritual guardians and say, I am putting myself, I want to learn. Could you have karma come back at me 3 times at once so that I can learn better? There's nothing like being slapped up the head with karmic retribution 3 times. We all have a backlog to draw on of both good and bad. So that's how I have come up in my own head with saying how, because I've met many Wiccans who've said, yes, well, I've experienced the rule of 3. It works. It happened to me. And I was like, okay, maybe somebody celestial has arranged that for you, because it's powerful working experience. But I believe it's like metaphysics is simply a branch of physics, and gravity doesn't change and karma doesn't change. It's just, what you put out comes back on you. In my opinion, I couldn't be totally wrong. As I frequently tell people, never underestimate the possibility that I may be full of it. So, but I will share everything I learned because otherwise one of these days I'm going to die and then start all over again. And the more things I can pass on, the less stupid things people have to do for themselves.
Right.
Anybody else have anything to say about the ethics of using magic?
Yeah, I got one thing to add. If you are able to detach yourself from the effects or repercussions from it, and you need to be morally or personally responsible, I find that is also denying all your attachments to reality. And once you detach yourself from reality in the world that you're working in, that affects you negatively, magically, personally, spiritually. People don't see that there's a underlying morality on abiding by the truth of what is, and being responsible for one's actions. I call it integrity, and it seems to be a principle that I really try to beat hard into some people that are trying to understand things, and it's an old word now, and it scares me that people don't understand things like integrity or onus, when it's the idea of being impeccable is about perfecting your craft, getting the edge sharp. And it takes practice by doing, but it's also about practice on who you are as a person and your relationship to everything. But that I digress and I start preaching, so I'll stop now.
It's that pesky soapbox. It keeps chasing me around and crawling under my feet. I guess you don't want to.
I'm going to confess that I would consider myself probably a soft magic user, if anything, because I've really only gleaned for myself from various places and applied in a mild way the abilities I have. I've no formal training. I've not read much in the way of books. I've had no compulsion to read books or anything about it. I seem to be finding my way all right, but I don't want to give the impression that I am anything but naive about most of this. So I come here expecting to learn, and I appreciate the learning I've been getting tonight and every other time I've been here.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, that's the exciting thing about changing times, changing worlds is that we can talk openly. Can you imagine doing this in the office? It's like, okay, maybe you better start polishing your resume because we don't want you around here. Yeah, this stuff works, and get used to it.
Mm-hmm.
It's wonderful to have other people to talk to about it. I'm going to go back and, I like Mark Shapikan's attitude because it's work. Learning how to use magic, learning how to direct magic, actually doing the push of the energy, raising the energy. These are learning techniques, makes you better at it. But it takes a lot of work, just as it takes 1,000 repetitions, 1,000 practicing scales to get good at playing the piano or the violin. You've got 1,000 throwing a blow to get good at martial arts. It's going to take you a lot of work. And this goes back to, and if you want to look at it, the show we did last week was on practicing. You have to practice to get good at anything. Mm-hmm. And that means a lot of drills, and it means a lot of doing things that seem kind of pointless in order to get better at it, in order to get stronger at it. And if you don't have the discipline to meditate every morning, to do the exercises, whatever they are, you're not going to become powerful. Now, one of the things that's nice about healing is the exercise of doing healing makes you better at it. And healing is never wasted. When I'm trying to display it in Runewalder classes, I will do a spell, the Runewalder rune for stopping a migraine, and I will direct it to somebody I don't know nearby is coming down with a migraine. Please alleviate their migraine. Because of how often I have done a migraine spell directed at somebody who I knew about and had them come back afterwards and said, oh yeah, that worked. I don't know what you did. And then frequently it's say, oh, could you do that thing again? Because I can feel a migraine coming on. Can you fix it? And at a certain point, it no longer works because the migraine is there for some reason. You have to figure out what that reason is and learn how to avoid that. But yeah, I know this works to stop migraines. I am happy to send out, if you learn distance healing techniques and you're on Facebook, I guarantee you friends will say, could you send healing energy this way? If you send healing energy out every time somebody asks for healing energy, you will get to be a stronger healer. You won't be necessarily better at laying on of hands, but you'll get better at doing distance healing.
One of my communicating with animals, both living and dead, and I was on the Rabble community for knitters at the time, and wound up doing a lot of readings for people, all across the United States and even in Finland. And I got pretty darn good at that. Other things, I don't stumble across opportunity to practice so much. I might want a mentor.
Everybody needs healing. That's why it was such a good selling point for the Christians, because they were early Christians embraced, Christ had given them the directive to go heal, and they did some pretty amazing things, and that's a good thing. We can't object to that. But trying to say no, we're the only ones who are allowed to do it, that's a little bit more problematic. You see the AMA saying no chiropractic or no homeopathy or no what's like, no. Hey, if it works, if it alleviates pain, let's go with it. So that's the thing is that there are magics for doing other things that I am not as comfortable with practicing on because I'm a little bit concerned with having unintended effects. And I think this is why divination is so common and popular, is essentially you are asking for information so that you can not do an inadvertent harm. Right. That is, to me, the goal of most kinds of divination is so that you can then direct your magic in a positive, non-dangerous way, because there's so much we don't know. So without, and this is important, without saying, okay, I'm going to put it in somebody else's hands, it's not my responsibility anymore. It's always your responsibility. If you did it, take responsibility for it. Yeah. I am wondering, as we're coming to the end of this, about next week, if I can't scare up a guest, and I love to have guests, if you can suggest a guest to me, I shall chase them down and get it. But I was thinking about making your own divinatory systems, using symbols that are good for you. I am sure we have the symbols of the tarot, we have symbols of the runes, we have symbols of the lines on our palms, but you can use almost anything for divination. And if you're good at sports, I think sports can provide you with the symbols. If you know a lot about physiology, you can use you can use human body. If you know a lot about numbers, you know, numerology will be your thing. But I think people will work better with any symbols they understand. I would be pathetic at any sports oriented ones. So, those who are here now, what do you think about that as a topic for next week?
I would.
Well, I've been had on the back burner of my head for years an oracle deck based on emergency medical services. I've started doing some using various clip art, but it's been kind of like just sitting there stagnating, and it's kind of nagging at me. So
let's talk about that next week. And I'll put up an announcement, and if we can get, for instance, Orion to come in and do his missing workshop from last November, that would be good. But
I wonder if I could get my friend who worked with that and devised that broke bitch tarot deck. Come on.
That's cool.
Because she was recently designing a tarot deck.
Well, there's oracle decks. I'm now in process of learning Lenormand, but let's call that, since I have used up the hour, I think we should call that the end. And I will